In this episode of How I Made It, I'm breaking down another real estate deal I did where I used my quantum flipping method for a $33,811 profit, which the whole concept of quantum flipping is based on the minimum amount of you needing to be involved in the process of doing real estate deals. In other words, minimum involvement with huge results. So for today's deal, I did it entirely from my computer. I never met the seller or the buyer. I never even stepped foot inside of the property or been to the city where it's located at. You can do this from anywhere in the world. And the best part of all is I also did this deal without spending any money buying or repairing the property. So I got in and out of this deal quickly with damn near no risk at all in this deal. And if you want to learn more about how you can do these types of deals yourself or do them more consistently, I put a link below this video in the description. You can click it and learn the quantum flipping method from me directly. Look, I'm here to help you do this for yourself, which is why I made this video. So if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now and follow me on social media for more content on how to do deals easier and with bigger profits using the quantum flipping method. All right, let's get into today's deal and how I made $33,811. All right, be sure to watch this all the way to the very end. I'm about to give you a lot of free game on this episode that's made me a lot of money and saved my ass in certain deals. So be sure to watch it to the end. So this was an off-market lead, which we went direct to the seller by reaching out to them with a text message. So this lead originated from text message marketing. And I can see that the lead was tagged in the system that it came from an absentee owned and vacant list, which means the seller might have some motivation considering the property is vacant. So nobody is living in it or renting the property. And the owner lives out of state from where the property is located. And even though it came from this type of lead list, we still need to qualify the lead and find out if that is the case and some other important factors, which we'll discuss next. So our appointment setter who handles text messaging will gather as much of the upfront information for us as possible on their initial conversation, which we want them to get the 4 pillars for us, okay? Meaning we want to know 1, what the condition of the property is, 2, the reason for selling or the seller's motivation, 3, what's the time frame to sell, and then 4, what's the asking price. And with that, they can hand it off to our acquisitions, who will utilize the information to make an offer to the seller and get the property under contract. Okay, so 1, for this lead, the seller basically said the property's in good condition, but the roof needs to be replaced. And since this was a text message lead, my appointment setter did try reaching out to the seller with the phone call to gather more condition info, but they were unable to. It looks like at that time, the seller couldn't talk because they were at work. So they moved on and gathered some other pillar info via text. All right, so 2, even though the lead was from a vacant home and absentee owner list, the seller told us that their motivation or reason for selling is if the price is right. It's always going to come down to if the price is right? But don't let that surprise you if you get a response like that when you ask a seller what's their reason for selling, because sometimes sellers don't admit it up front what the real reason is for selling. All right. Now 3, their time frame for selling is ASAP, which is great because the house is also vacant, so we don't have to wait for anyone to move out. So if we can get the numbers to work, then we can close and get paid ASAP. And finally, for the price, the seller said that they want $200,000. And when we asked, are they flexible? They said they can go down to $190,000. So just by asking that extra question, the seller already dropped their asking price, $10,000, and we haven't even made an offer or started negotiating yet. Guys, this is an interesting lead, okay? Because the property is vacant and the data is saying that the property is absentee owned, which means they're not doing anything with the property right now. And by it just sitting there vacant, it's more of a liability. So the motivation should be strong. However, the seller isn't telling my appointment setter that initially. And we also don't know the full details on the property condition. So we'll have to get some more info on the phone call with my acquisitions or my closer, okay? But don't be surprised if you don't get everything you need on the first call or on a text message. Remember, the first call, a cold call or a cold text message, the first outreach that you do, they don't know you. Okay, so they don't know if you're trying to scam them or do anything weird like that. So for us, the first outreach is really meant for a light pre-qualification. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's a phone call or a text message, you're just doing a light pre-qual. Then if the lead is pre-qualified, our appointment setter will pass them over to our acquisitions, to our closer, who's trained to further qualify the lead and then take them all the way to getting a contract signed. So it might take some speaking to them more and building some more rapport and establishing some credibility. But, if they are really interested in selling, and, they'll loosen up some. And that's exactly what happened on the next call when my acquisitions closer got on the phone with the seller and they started following the quantum flipping acquisitions process. Okay, so my closer found out that the home needs a new roof, the kitchen needs updating, looks like the bathroom needs updating, the HVAC unit is from 1998, so that was outdated and will need to be replaced. So just by following the process, my closer uncovered so much more valuable information about the condition of the property, which we need to know this in order to determine an offer. Okay, as well as it's an indication on what really might be the reason that the property is still vacant and why the seller wants to sell. This is exactly what my closer found out next regarding the seller's motivation. Okay, so looking at the notes here, my closer found out that the reason the seller wants to sell is because they moved out of state. In fact, they now live all the way on the West Coast, and this property is located on the East Coast, okay? Which means there's definitely motivation. Looking at this right now, like this lead is getting hotter and hotter. And the reason why I say that is because there's clearly repairs that need to be done to the property. The property is also vacant, and the seller lives all the way across the country, all the way on the other side of the U.S. Okay, so going back and forth to the property is going to be an inconvenience, and it'll start to become really expensive to keep traveling back and forth like that. And there's clearly work that needs to be done in order to get it in tip-top shape. So even if they were going to get a contractor to do the work, it's still going to be an inconvenience, and it's not going to be cheap either. So this sounds like a lead, like a hot lead. It sounds like it would be a hassle for the seller to have to deal with the property. And most sellers or most people would just, they'd rather just walk away and not have to deal with this if the price makes sense, which we'll get to that in a second here. Okay. When my acquisitions talked to them, the seller was still willing to sell ASAP, which is great. And for the seller's asking price, we know that they initially told my appointment setter they wanted $200,000 and they were flexible and could drop to $190,000. However, we still have to run our own numbers and see what makes sense for us in regards to an offer. So after running the numbers, my closer offered $150,000 to $155,000. Okay, between $150,000 and $155,000. Which the seller rejected our first offer. Okay, so we countered offered, and after some negotiations, we agreed to pay $175,000, which is $25,000 lower than what the seller initially was asking for, but it's also $25,000 higher than our first offer. So we basically split the difference and met in the middle on this deal. Okay, now we knew going into this deal that there were going to be, we were getting in at a good price. Okay, so we were going to have all of our exit strategies available here. And for this deal, we wanted to quick flip it to another buyer by just flipping the paperwork over to them for a profit. So next, we just needed to get the buyer. And looking at the notes here, like the buyer for this deal was an institutional buyer. Okay, it was a hedge fund that buys hundreds of homes across multiple states for the purpose of fixing and flipping. So, they're very savvy buyers, and they knew that this deal was in a desirable location. And like I said, however, they are, really savvy investors. I mean, you don't get to doing hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate deals if you're not. And the reason I say that is because when they were discussing the deal with me, they started off at a lower offer around $200,000. Okay, they were offering me around $200,000. Mind you, I already had other offers I was working through, which was, one of them was high as $225,000, which means, I could potentially make a profit of $50,000 on this one deal. So I wasn't about to just rush and accept an offer like I used to do when I first got started in the business years ago, where I would sell my deals fast, and I would also, because I was selling them fast, I'd sell them cheap. So, I was leaving a lot of profit, a lot of money on the table by selling them fast and cheap back then. But eventually I learned and I developed a process for selling deals. Okay. So I knew that with this deal, I was going to follow my quantum flipping process for dispositioning the deal for the highest and the best offer. Okay. Now, it's not about being greedy here. Okay. It's not about being greedy. It's about being smart and maximizing your potential or your deals, your profit. Remember, quantum flipping is about working smarter and not unnecessarily harder. So by following my quantum flipping disposition process, I knew that it would help ensure I maximize this deal. So I stuck with the process. I kept working the deal, negotiating, and shortly thereafter, a number of my buyers increased their price. Okay, so the offers went from around $200,000 to $205,000 to $210,000 to eventually I accepted an offer of $212,000, which was a profit of $37,000. Okay, so $37,000 profit. Now, that didn't just happen on its own. Okay, it required me to use a process, strategy, some counter offering, which, as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't doing that when I first got started in this business some years ago. So just think, if I would have accepted my buyer's first offer of $200,000, that means I would have left $12,000 of profit on the table, right? I would have still made $25,000 on this deal, which is still good. But like, I know you agree with me that $37,000 is even better, right? So like, if you need help or if you want to learn more about how to maximize your profits with a proven process for dispositioning your deals, so that way you know exactly what to do and what not to do and how to do it, then click the link below in the description of this video, or just go to learnquantumflipping.com and I'll give you the exact blueprint I use to do these deals. Okay, so now you might be wondering, where this buyer and the other buyer, where do they come from? Where do the buyers come from? As in, how do I get them? Okay, well, there's several ways of building a buyer's list. And I'll make a separate video later about some of the ways we do this at my company. But for this buyer, I reached out to them and I put them on my buyer's list myself. And what's most important here, and I can't stress this enough, is that you need a process of how you qualify and vet the buyers. Because there's so many people out there that aren't actual buyers, and they'll waste your time and they can really fuck up your deal if you're not careful. So you need to understand what questions that you need to ask them, what information you need them to provide you, if you can't already find it yourself online. And this is what helps ensure you to get deals closed, that money gets made, and that everyone gets paid, to complete a successful transaction. So you're going to vet them. And actually, whether you realize it or not, they're vetting you a lot of the times too. Okay. Remember, they have money to invest and people are coming at them left and right from all directions trying to get their money. So when you speaking with them, you want to make a good impression. And you do that by having a blueprint or, having a blueprinted process. And with time, you get better and better at it. It's actually pretty easy once you know what to do. Of course, if you're a Quantum Flipping Blueprint member, you'll automatically get everything I'm talking about here and more. Okay, so guys, as I said, I can't stress this enough. Vet your buyers. Some of you, unfortunately, like me, have lost a deal or deals because you didn't have a process. And instead of making $33,811 on a deal like I did here, you made zero. Or even worse, you lost money, right? You might have had to forfeit your earnest money deposit. Or maybe you hurt your reputation with sellers in the marketplace. So there's no reason for you to be losing deals because you didn't do your part and vet the buyer. And as the saying goes, all money isn't good money. So be sure you have a process to separate the real buyers from the posers or the fake buyers. And again, if you need my help with this, just reach out to me. It's no problem, okay? I want to see you guys win and make money, not lose money or lose deals, okay? So with that said, let's move on. And let's talk about how I exited this deal. Okay, so this property was actually one that I decided I didn't want to hold on to as like a rental or for another use. So as I mentioned earlier, I decided to quick flip it by simply flipping the paperwork over to another buyer for a profit. However, because of the amount I was going to make on this deal, I needed to change the paperwork around and just add another step into the closing process, which is I needed to fund the deal myself or close on it myself. Okay. Then I was going to turn right around same day and flip the property to another buyer. And the reason why I did this is because I wanted to hide the fee or the profit that I was going to make on this deal. Okay. And almost anytime you're going to make more than a certain amount of money on a deal, you should double close the deal so you can keep your fee private from the end buyer. And as I said earlier, it's not about being greedy. It's about being smart. See, hedge funds, turnkey rental companies, real estate investment companies, all of them have something in common. They're all run by people. And one thing about people is, we're human, we're emotional. So not all, but some buyers get upset if they feel like you're making too much money on a deal. Regardless of how much work you put in to get the deal and get the deal done, some buyers, when they see your fee, and by law, they will see it on the closing statement. So, if you've done deals or you've done enough deals before, you might run into this type of buyer. And some hedge funds and other institutional investors, they actually have rules in place that won't let them pay more than, X amount of dollars in fees for a paper flip deal or this type of quick flip deal I'm talking about. So rather than having your deal fall apart because your buyer refuses to close unless you reduce your fee or even, make up excuses on why they need to pay less, or possibly, they go ahead and close, but going forward on the next deal, like they really lowball you on the offer, or even worse, they're mad at you and because you made more money than they did on the deal. So, going forward, they won't buy any deals from you again. So to avoid all of this, we will double close the transaction if our fee is larger than, X amount. And as a general rule of thumb, for some investors like myself, when I say X amount, it's like $15,000 or $20,000. Okay. That's a general rule of thumb. Anything over that amount, some investors will just go ahead and double close on the deal. Now, I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm just saying it's an option. And based on your deal and based on the buyer you're selling the deal to, you need to consider that. Okay. Some buyers of mine, they don't care at all, what I make on a deal. And as long as they get to buy it at the price that makes sense for them. And that's the way it should be, but we're human and people don't always think that way. So to avoid having your deal fall apart because the buyer walks away or having your fee get cut and reduced because they don't want to close unless you do that, this is the strategy to help with that, okay? This strategy is what to do in these certain situations. Now, since I'm on the subject of helping you not leave money on the table and trying to help you make as much money on your deal as possible, let me mention that when you double close, you will most likely be paying some closing costs on the first side of the first transaction, okay? The first transaction is between you and the seller, okay? So, and on the second transaction between you and the buyer, since it's a double close, right? You're closing 2 times. The second transaction between you and the buyer, it's most likely that the buyer is going to be paying the closing costs. So depending on your title company and the purchase price of the property that you're buying, the closing costs, they can range from hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars. So you need to make sure you're working with a good title company who understands, what you're doing and that they're investor friendly, because if they are, they can give you some investor discounts on closings, especially being that this is almost certainly going to be a cash transaction. Okay, which brings me to my next point. When you're double closing, not all title companies are familiar with how to do this. or will even do it. So be sure to vet your title company in advance to make sure they're familiar and that they understand clearly how to handle it. Okay, I have a simple script of questions I either email or I ask the title company via phone when I vet a new one before we start working with them. And if you need help with that, just let me know. Just reach out to me. So some title companies, they require that you bring the money to the closing table on the first transaction between you and the seller. And what happens if you don't have the money? Like in this deal, my purchase price is $175,000 plus $4,354 in closing costs, which is a total of $179,354 that I need to bring to the closing table to close my side of this transaction. Now, if you don't have the money, don't worry, okay? And even if you do have the money, you might not want to lay out that much capital on one deal, especially if you're like me and you're doing multiple deals at a time. You don't want to have to, have your money being tied up or, having to keep moving money around. So what's the strategy here? Well, there are lenders who will fund the transaction for you, all cash, same day, and they'll make sure you get your deal closed, okay? But in return, they will charge you 1, 2, even 3% fee of the total purchase price, which, for example, on this deal, the total purchase price is $179,354. So they would charge me almost $1,800 at a 1% fee, or almost $3,600 at 2% fee, or almost $5,400 at a 3%. Now, I get everyone has to make money, but what sucks here is that this fee that you're being charged is coming out of your profit on the deal. And not everyone is making over $33,000 on their deal. So what happens if your fee was only $15,000? That can mean anywhere from 10 to 30% of your profit is gone. And a lot of you will run into this scenario and be faced with this decision. Okay, so, or you already have, and you've paid to use a transactional lender. And in the beginning, I was the same way. However, I do have a lender that charges me 0% fee, and they will fund my deals for me up to $1 million per deal. So guys, this is a huge advantage. Okay, it's an extremely valuable relationship to have. It literally has saved me and made me tens of thousands of dollars extra on deals where it made sense for me to double close and use this type of lender. And that's tens of thousands of dollars that wouldn't have been in my account or in your account, right? So this is huge. Now, this is a relationship that's part of my quantum flipping method, okay? So for the quantum flipping blueprint members, I share this relationship with you too as part of being a member. All right, you automatically that I'm going to automatically share the relationship with you. So now you know why I chose to double close this transaction as my exit strategy for this deal, which brings us to the final phase of the deal. Okay, and that's the transaction coordination phase. All right, so to make sure this deal gets completed and that everyone gets paid, we have we always put our deals with the title company, and they handle the rest of the transaction from here. So for this deal, I follow the quantum flipping method like I normally do, and the buyer was great to work with. They got their funds submitted on time, and their communication was great. The seller was great too. They got their documents and everything submitted to the title company on time. Okay, so we were just waiting on the title company to do their part with the title search, with the lien search, and all of their, the title work that they normally do in order to close a transaction. And I've worked with this title company for years. Okay, I've done several deals with them, so I knew we were in good hands, and that we just had to wait. We just had to wait for them to give us the green light that we were clear to close, and which they did. Okay, so I got the email from our closer at the title company with a scheduled closing date, and I was just now one step away from collecting my $37,000 fee. Okay, all right. It was on the day that we were supposed to close that I got a call from the buyer telling me we have a problem, and that apparently there was a mistake with the title company giving us a clear to close because their roofing contractor, our buyer's roofing contractor, informed them that there were some code violation issues that were previously not cleared up with the property. And because of that, the city had been charging fines and they hadn't been paid. And because of that, we obviously can't close today. And it looks like this deal might not happen. Right? Like, I'm laughing right now, but I sure as hell wasn't laughing in the moment when hearing this news from the buyer. But if you've been in business or you've done several deals, then you already know that not every deal is going to go perfect. A lot of them will go smooth, but not every single one. Okay, so I use the comparison of a roller coaster ride. And you know that when you're on a roller coaster, there's going to be some ups and downs, some twists and turns, and it's really, expected. And after being in business and doing enough deals, you understand that at some point you may have those same twists and turns in a deal. Okay. However, the more you ride the roller coaster, the less it shocks you when there's some ups and downs or some twists and turns, because you're prepared for it. And that's the same thing here for me. I collected myself while I was on the phone with the buyer, and instead of getting upset or being irate, I just, I started discussing, okay, what could we do as a plan to keep this deal alive and try to, work through the issues. So I asked the buyer for an extension, okay, for the first closing date, to give the seller and the title company some time to determine what the issues are and come up with a plan to clear them up. And then, hopefully we can still close at a later date. All right. And the buyer agreed to a closing date extension. So that was awesome. So as soon as I got off the phone with the buyer, I gave a call to the closer at our title company, and they confirmed the same thing, that this was all brand new news to them and that they already had been on the phone with the city to find out, what the issues are and what needs to be done to resolve it. And I asked them, had they already informed the seller, because the last that I heard from the seller, they were headed to sign closing docs. And our closer said they hadn't informed the seller yet because they first wanted to clarify, what the code violation issues were, and then have a clear understanding of what the seller needs to do in order to fix it. So I let the title company know that it would be best for them to reach out to the seller so they can prepare the seller that we're not closing today, and then they can let them know roughly what's going on and what's being done to try and figure out a way to resolve it. And then once they speak with the seller, I said, hey, just give me a call back, let me know so I can be prepared to structure my conversation with the seller accordingly to keep the deal alive. All right. So guys, this is why it's so important to have a great relationship with your title company, because if and when things go south, and issues come up, unexpected issues come up, your title company will be there to try and help you get through the situation as much as they can, especially if you have a good relationship with them. And that's exactly what happened here. They could have said, oh, well, it's just another file and we're not getting paid $33,000. So it's not that important to us if it closes or not, but they didn't. We came up with a tactical plan to try and keep this deal together. And just like I said, it's important to have a great relationship with your title company. It's just as important to try and have a great relationship with your seller too, because if something comes up or doesn't go directly according to plan, you don't want your sellers to get upset and want to cancel the deal on you or refuse to give you an extension if there's unforeseen title issues like what happened here. Remember, people are human, right? We're humans and we're emotional. So, the seller was expecting to close and get $175,000 on this day. And they might have already made other financial plans and commitments based on it, expecting that we're clear to close. So if you're not nurturing your sellers throughout the transaction by checking in on them and updating them, then you're really running the risk of them not being committed to seeing it through if there's an issue. And, they could just go to another company, you know what I mean? And that might offer them more money or offer them the same money. However, in this case, I stuck to our follow-up process and I nurtured the seller along the way. So when I had to give them this phone call and discuss this issue of us not closing today, they were understanding. In fact, they were surprised about the code violations and the fines too. So when I asked them for a closing date extension for us to have more time to work together with our title company to find out how to resolve the issues, the seller agreed. Now, I will say that I've been through some situations like this in the past. Never on the day of closing. Like this was a first for sure. But there have been situations with the property that come up during the title search phase. And because I went through those situations in the past, I was prepared and I wasn't shocked that we hit a bump. I followed my process for what to do in these situations. Really, it's less about the problems you face. It's more about the solutions you learn and the resilience that you build by going through these situations that really they help you in future deals. So fast forward, once the title company got a clear understanding on what needed to happen and how much was owed in fines, they informed me and the seller and what the seller options were to get it resolved. But the challenge here is that due to the seller living out of state and their job restrictions, they couldn't just freely travel back to the city where the property was located at and fix the issues. So instead, it was going to take them longer than expected because of their job. So we had to extend the closing further. And on the other hand, my buyer, who had already provided us a closing date extension the first time and was being patient, they didn't want to wait for the seller any longer to fix the issue. So, I refunded them their earnest money deposit, which was $5,000, because I was unable to deliver the property free and clear to close on the date that we agreed upon. But no problem. We didn't make a fuss about it. They were cordial and we kept the relationship intact. However, now I had to go back to the drawing board and get another buyer to quick flip this deal to. But I already had several offers from before. But the challenge here was going to be that I had to let them know that the property, it has some title issues. It won't be clear to close for some time. And some still might be interested. Some might drop their offer price. And some of them might have already moved on to another deal. And that's pretty much what happened. I got a mixed bag when I went back to the previous buyers. But because of the quantum flipping method for dispositions, I was confident and I already knew that I could still get a buyer for this deal. As long as the seller did their part to fix the title issue, I knew I was going to get a buyer and we should be okay. And shortly thereafter, I had another buyer who was a fix and flipper, and they knew that the property was located in a good area, so he was okay with waiting on the deal. But he still needed to inspect the property and confirm his offer. All right. So once he went out and inspected the property, he gave me an offer of $205,000, okay, which I countered offered him by following my quantum flipping process, and we ended up agreeing on $210,000, which was still $2,000 less than my previous buyer, than the previous offer, which means that I would have a $35,000 profit here instead of a $37,000 profit. Now, the only catch, as if I needed another catch for this deal, was that this buyer was maxed at the price and they didn't want to pay closing costs if they had to pay the higher price of $210,000. Okay, so what did I do? Okay, I locked in the $210,000 offer with my buyer, which gave me a gross fee of $35,000 profit. And I told the buyer I would just cover the closing costs for him. Okay. And with that said, I still had a little more work to do because the new buyer's offer had changed and was now lower. Plus, I had to cover closing costs now because I was double closing of a little more than $4,000. I felt it was only right and worth a shot that I go back to the seller and ask for a price reduction on the purchase price. Since, we had to wait longer and there was clearly more risk now to waiting and getting the deal done due to the code violations. Now, I could have just took the haircut on my side and reduced my profit only. But instead, since, I didn't want my fee to be the only one that was going to be getting reduced, and it was going to get reduced here by about $7,000. So I went back to the seller and I asked for a price reduction of $7,000. Okay. And although the seller didn't agree to giving me a $7,000 price reduction, they did agree to a $3,000 reduction. So not bad, considering that would have been $3,000 of profit I would have missed out on if I didn't ask for the reduction. Now, guys, you don't just pick up the phone and wing a seller price reduction. That's probably not going to result in a reduction. In fact, it might even lose you the deal. No, like, I have a process for how to do this, okay? When to do this and what to say to the seller. So if you need help, with this, then just reach out to me. And again, if you're a Quantum Flipping Blueprint member, of course you automatically get this. Plus, I will personally train you on how to do it, okay? And I've gotten price reductions of like $50,000 before. So trust me, this works, okay? And I'll be sharing other deals on future episodes of how I made it that we got seller price reductions for, okay? Side note though, we only do the seller price reduction strategy when we need to or when it's warranted, okay? But you can utilize it as you see fit. I've even heard of some other companies that do it every time on a deal. I'm not necessarily a fan of that. I prefer to do business cleaner. As I said before, it's not about being greedy, but hey, to each his own. Okay, so guys, we're really kind of wrapping it up. Like, I'm happy to say that we got through the roller coaster ride on this deal, and the rest of this transaction was pretty smooth. I mean, the seller took care of their part to get the code violations resolved. The buyer did their part and was patiently, waiting for the seller. And finally, the title company got their actual green light this time for a clear to close, and we did. So everyone was happy here. The seller got their $172,000. The buyer got a good deal and a nice investment property to fix and flip. I got my $33,811, and the title company, they made their money for closing the transaction. So everybody won here, and that's the best way to do business, right? I want to show you a message here from the closer at the title company, thanking us and letting us know that the closing was being finalized. And then here's a copy of the HUD, which shows the $33,811 that I got paid. And here's a copy of that wire deposit receipt of me receiving that $33,811 that I got paid. Okay. I will say though that, this definitely was a roller coaster ride of a deal, and some deals will be like this. And I'll share others with you in the future that, that were roller coaster rides as well. But the great thing about going along for the ride is the experience you gain from it. And it's really important in business to get connected with people who've already gone before you and went on the roller coasters. Okay, they already survived the tough deals and situations, and they can help you avoid making the same mistakes. That experience and information is extremely valuable. It could be the difference between you making $33,811 profit for yourself, or by not knowing the strategies or having the tools, you might make a lot less, or even worse, you might not make anything at all. So, get connected. And if you need my help, of course, just reach out to me. Remember, if I can do it, then anybody can do it once they have the blueprint. Okay. It's not rocket science, guys. It's quantum flipping. So if you want to work smarter and not harder by learning the quantum flipping method to be able to consistently do real estate deals of up to 5 or 6 figures yourself, then just click the link in the description or go to, learnquantumflipping.com, and I'll give you the exact blueprint I use to do these deals. Okay. I'll see you soon for the next episode of How I Made It, where I'm breaking down a deal where I made $25,000. See you soon.